Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and what you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. This particular episode originally aired May 22nd, 2015. It's just me, so be warned, and I'm talking about the great Tim Curry. This was meant to be the second in a string of episodes that were looking at actors known for their villainous portrayals, and there was a lot of stuff going on around then that it didn't quite get off the ground the way I wanted it to, and it was a weird time in my personal life. Again, this is 2015, so there was stuff. Uh, this was actually the last full year of the podcast, more or less. So this particular episode, show at least. So yeah, this one's about Tim Curry. The only thing I want to mention before I get into this, I talk about his portrayal of Cardinal Richelieu in a version of the Three Musketeers near the end. And I make a point past me that none of the Three Musketeers adaptations have been all that close to the original source material, and, well, that's not quite true. It was true as far as I knew it at the time I said it, so you'll have to forgive past me his ignorance of especially like Russian film. There's a very good Russian adaptation that's very, very close to the source material, and there's a handful of others that are closer to it than not. The point I was trying to make is that, especially for the more Western audiences, most of the adaptations of the Three Musketeers veer pretty heavily away from the source material for reasons that might even be understandable, but that they do. And that has only become more true as time has gone on. I think since the recording of that show, there have been at least two other attempts to make a Three Musketeers movie, none of which have. Dude, they cast Christoph Waltz as Richelieu in just one of the worst movies you'll ever see. It's an utter waste of that man's talent. Sorry, not about the Three Musketeers. Just wanted to make the point that my past self is speaking a little bit out of turn, but forgive him. Hadn't had as much experience as I do now in 2023 as I re-record this intro. So thank you very much for listening. It's been a fun exercise going back to some of these old shows. So thank you very, very much. Anything you can do to support the network is helpful. Appreciate it. Until then, let me throw it to my past self, talking about Tim Curry, who, as I record this, I believe is still with us. So keep going. Tim Curry is awesome. So hope you enjoy the show.
When the devil is too busy and death a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm the bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm the pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wiggle and writhe, and it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me, I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
This is not the 411 Ground and Pound radio show. This is Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I'm Robert Winfree. I happen to host both of those shows. So, again, my apologies there. Normally this show opens with Voltaire's When You're Evil, and we got there. Kind of indicative of the day I've been having. Nothing's quite firing correctly. Everything's just a tad off. Hopefully that will be the last instance of that, happening tonight, because we've got a good show lined up, one that
I'm really happy to sit here and talk with you all about. Uh, Normally, here at the Religion Broadcasting Network, we're all about synergy. We try to do things, together. This has been Mad Max Week here on the Religion Broadcasting Network. Mark and I reviewed the new Mad Max movie on Wednesday, and yelled at each other about it. It was fun. The Long Road to Ruin yesterday was about Mad Max, the original trilogy. But there's just nothing about Mad Max that can really talk about here on Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. There's only one quasi-interesting villain. It's just not worth the amount of time and energy it would. Yeah, I mean, there's just no return on the investment. It's not interesting. It's not fun. I don't think anyone would care that much. Consequently, I get to do what I want here. It's the Friday night slot. No one really cares about Friday nights. Doesn't matter if it's television, or podcasting. The Friday night slot, I'm kind of left to my own devices. Now, for major releases, I'm going to be trying to synergize up because I'm a good team player. Like when Ant-Man comes out, we're going to talk about Hank Pym's Rogues Gallery and whatnot. But tonight, because I didn't have anything to synergize with, anyway, this is a long way to get to my point here. Again, I apologize for that. But tonight, I'm bringing back my examination of actors who are known for their villainous roles. The first one of these was done in January. Pat Mullen was kind enough to be on the show, and we talked about Sir Christopher Lee and all of the great things that he's done. You can find that particular episode in the archives. I encourage everyone to look it up. A lot of fun Pat and I had talking. But, moving forward, I thought about it. And since I don't have any kind of mandate, I will bring back examining actors and some of their careers and their, famous villain roles. And Tim Curry was kind of on my mind this week. Don't know why. But he's as good a choice as any, and better than a great deal. So that's what we're going to be talking about here tonight. Me, mostly. I don't have anyone lined up, anyone, to sit here and talk with me about it. So it's going to be me, by and large. Unless anyone wants to, call in and share some thoughts, memories, experiences, and whatnot from any of Tim Curry's villainous roles. And there's a lot of them. I actually looked up the guy's, filmography, and that man is a prolific actor. Movies, television, voice acting. He's pretty much everywhere. And he's he's good in all of it. So if anyone out there listening live would like to call in and share a few thoughts or whatnot, the number is 323-657-0901. Once again, 323-657-0901. If you want to call in using Skype, there's on the Blog Talk Radio player page, there is a Skype icon on the top of it, kind of in the middle, and then boxes of dialogue to click through. It'll get you on the air. So again, if you would like to, just favorite thoughts, memories, or whatnot of any of Tim Curry's villainous roles. There's quite a bit of them. I'm going to kind of be going in chronological order, but again, anyone calling in, kind of whatever strikes your mind about it. Crazily enough, one of the first ones, this was just his first actual film on big screen. His first role ever was a television movie, but Tim Curry's kind of introduction to the world, especially the world of cult movies, was as the primary antagonist in, again, the cult classic 75? Yeah, 75. The Rocky Horror Picture Show. This is a film adaptation of a Broadway play, I believe. A play of some variety. I couldn't tell you if it was on Broadway or off Broadway. And he's, again, the primary antagonist, the transsexual doctor. And for anyone out there who's never actually seen the movie, I can't sum it up. I could tell you what happens, but it wouldn't mean anything. It's one of those that has to be seen to kind of really be believed. It's just a very odd movie. And again, there's Tim Curry front and center I wish I could explain on a kind of a subconscious level or a cultural psyche level why we tend to be off-put by transsexual people. I can't. I'm not versed enough in the literature or the sciences behind it to really kind of delve into it, but I imagine that's a particular community, the transgender community, that is going to have probably the hardest time getting everyone kind of over prejudices and initial reactions and whatnot. And I really do wish I fully understood why we have kind of singled out that as something that we don't like. And again, that's not, I don't want any of this to come off as transphobic or what have you. This is an examination of us as a society. but that's is just something that kind of is a tad unsettling. And I wish I knew the full extent of why, but a very young Tim Curry in drag, singing, and in addition to being kind of a pretty quintessential mad scientist in a lot of ways, it's a tad unsettling and bear in mind it's also very much so designed to be. But I wish I knew the full extent of why we have such a natural, kind of instinctual aversion to that, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, when you actually think about it, just the notion of being completely off-put by something like that is, again, it's odd and it doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense. But when you're trying to scare someone, when you're trying to get across, this person is evil or bad, or again, the opposing force, and he's all of those in that particular role. It's a great way to do it. Anyone in drag seems to kind of elicit that kind of response. So it's a very good performance. I mean, this is a role that Curry had been playing on the stage for a while before it was adapted into the film. And it's one of his better known works, and we're going to get into some of the others as well. But the Rocky Horror Picture Show is still, again, a cult classic. It still gets played on most drive-through or drive-in theaters, if those still exist out there in the world. Will probably devote a night to this. A lot of smaller theaters, not big megaplexes, but one screens might do a night a month or so that show this. It's, again, a classic as far as that goes, and if you're not interested in the full movie, I would just at the very least say find the version of it that is done in 30 seconds with bunnies, or 60 seconds with bunnies, because it's those bunnies, man. They ruined Reservoir Dogs for me, but they're hilarious. I don't think I stopped laughing at the Jaws one for a while after I saw it, but and again, that's his his big introduction, and he's a big, bold, bombastic transsexual character in a movie that is just by and large insane from top to bottom, in a very good, appealing way, mind you, not insane in Tommy Wiseau's The Room, where you just go why. God, that movie. That's a whole other thing. But again, that's your introduction, and it establishes very quickly that he's got great screen presence, which is something that you either have or you don't, by and large. Presence is not something that can be taught. It can be refined, but you can't manufacture it. And Tim Curry absolutely has presence. He's able to translate that into whatever emotion he wants to elicit, but when he's on screen, and you're paying attention to him. And that's a very difficult thing to pull off. Again, you kind of got it or you don't. And the other thing about Tim Curry, and this is going to be a bit, kind of general before I move on to the next role I really want to talk about, because, again, the crazy transsexual transvestite from Transsexual Transylvania, if memory serves. I haven't seen the movie in quite some time. Tim Curry has had a tremendous face for acting. If you're listening to this, if you're watching it, I've got there's a slideshow going because I am trying to, bump up the production values here and whatnot. So there's nice things to look at instead of just, the profile picture, which I believe is still Peter Griffin. And again, just the way he's able to manipulate his face is a real blessing for him to have. It's a gift that I'm sure he's worked very hard on, but he can, change it to be whatever he wants it to be. His smile is almost disproportionately large. I mean, there's a compare and contrast picture on the internet of character from Home Alone 2 with the classic animated Grinch smile that actually curls in on itself 3 or 4 times. And not quite as exaggerated, but there's some similarities there. He's got when he smiles, it's a big smile, and it's another one of those things that's disconcerting when he wants it to be, because it looks wrong. Again, we have a natural tendency to seek out proper proportions, and here he is kind of monkeying with that, and it's a really great thing for him to be able to do. And his evil smile is, it's the stuff of legend, really, at this point. He's able to grin and it be, whatever he wants it to be. It can be terrifying, it can be comical, it can be, genuinely filled with mirth, but he's great at emoting with his face, and he's very, very good at it. His eyes are kind of the same way. He emotes very well with them, whatever it happens to be he's trying to convey. And so the next one I want to talk about, a lot of that is very important for it because, again, I'm kind of going through these chronologically, so there's a few I'm going to be skipping over that you all might want to find or whatnot, but he was the primary antagonist, Bill Sykes, in a version of Oliver Twist. I haven't seen it. That would be fun. Again, that would make sense. Again, Curry with everything that he has in Oliver Twist. One of those classic Dickens tales. And Dickens knew how to write a villain. He understood what it took to make a good villain in literature, and Sykes is certainly one of them. But his next the next big role that is really worth talking about came in 1985, coincidentally the year I was born. He played the Lord of Darkness in Ridley Scott's Legend, one of Tom Cruise's first films. He's, for those of you who've never seen it or have only seen, parodies or pictures, the big horn guy, referred to in some circles. Yeah, that's Tim Curry. Underneath all that prosthetic, all that makeup, yep, that's him. It's odd, but when you know it's him, you can see it. You can absolutely see it in the eyes, again, in the face, despite, the gobs of makeup that went on to him, and a very good job done by whoever designed that creature. I don't know who it is off the top of my head, so I apologize to the makeup artist. But he's still and this is something that gets talked about here on this show, on a few others. Sean Comer and I have brought it up numerous times. But an actor who can act through and with heavy prosthesis like that, it's a mark of true professionalism, true gift. Because not a lot of people can do it, but anybody who knows how to work with it is able to use it to their benefit. I mean, most famously, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, but there are plenty of other examples. Anyone who's done The Mummy justice is able to emote through, again, bandages of your face, and both Karloff and I think Christopher Lee have both played The Mummy and done so very, very well. For that same reason, they're able to work with the makeup instead of be hindered by it. And in Legend, you get a lot of that from Curry. Of course, one of the most important things you get out of Legend is the voice. And Tim Curry has a wonderful voice. Very, a bit deep, very rich in tone. And it makes, those are qualities that we tend to associate with, a malicious character when it's done properly. And he's very easily able to turn his vocal quality into being scary, into being menacing. And again, here he is as the Lord of Darkness, in, as far as Legend goes, a rough analog for Satan. And his voice is a big part of what made him so successful. I mean, the character looks very striking, and fortunately the voice matches. That could have been very poor. It could have come off very poorly if you've got, that great get-up, and what comes out of the mouth is, my voice, instead of someone who sounds like, the Lord of Darkness. And Tim Curry absolutely was able to do that. And again, another thing to his eminent credit, he very rarely lost that as far as his vocal characterization. He's always had a great voice. It's actually kind of a crying shame that he was cast as Gomez Addams in not only easily the worst of those three movies, but he had to follow the guy who was basically made for it. He plays Gomez in the third Addams Family movies. It's Addams Family Reunion, if memory serves. And pretty much everyone who had been in the first two didn't come back. They were all recast. And Gomez was played in the first two movies by Raul Julia, and it was perfect. I mean, one of those examples of perfect actor for the role, written very well. I mean, just again, you're trying to follow perfection, and it's never gonna work. Again, whoever tries to play, I've mentioned this example before, whoever tries to play J. Jonah Jameson, if they don't get J.K. Simmons back, is gonna just fall flat on their face. Not because they're bad, but just nobody's gonna follow that. He was perfect for it, and I firmly believe that Raul Julia was perfect as Gomez Addams. And Tim Curry, again, for the third one, which was just a horrible idea from top to bottom. I'm not going to talk too much about that one because he was, again, the protagonist instead of the antagonist. But it would have made sense. Tim Curry has what you want. He has, again, the big smile, and Gomez, known for, kind of that big silly grin from time to time, had the proper voice. Just the worst. That movie is awful. Just awful. But, again, and back to Legend, so I don't get too far off track when I'm sitting here talking to myself. He's got the voice that you could easily associate with, again, Lord of Darkness. Yeah, Tim Curry's voice basically coming out of that evil monstrosity, it makes sense. It is a very complete vision of the character. Everything fits within it. And it's, again, his voice would be a big part of his entire career, not just because, partially because Curry is also a fairly prolific voice actor. This is one of those things I hadn't known until I got doing some research for this and looked it up, but as far as just voice acting goes, the next one I want to briefly touch on, and something that I have, some pictures up for, but he's the voice of Hexus in Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, and if you're of about my age, that's one of those movies you wound up seeing. I mean, objectively speaking, it's one of those almost sickeningly environmentalist movies from the very early 90s that we all kind of got bombarded with. There were, anti-pollution, anti-industrialization, anti-deforestation, and whatnot. And again, 90s crazy time, so many ways. But here you have, kind of the embodiment of, and the result of all of this pollution, and it's Tim Curry. And across the two forms of Hexus, has a nice singing number that I should have uploaded probably, but I don't want to get sued. And again, just what he's able to do with his voice in that. He actually alternates his voice well enough to go for, I believe the beginning version of Hexus is a giant smog monster, so incorporeal and whatnot, and then the final version is a oil-covered skeleton. And again, in the mark of kind of a true professional, he sounds a little different from embodiment to embodiment. It's not big. It's not, you think it's a different actor, but, the physical character has gone from, again, smoke, which sounds different than than something a bit more tangible, which, again, bone and oil. And, again, just the mark of a true professional, altering things just a little bit so they continue to make sense. And, I mean, a small nuance that really, it wouldn't have detracted anything if it hadn't been there. But with it being there, it actually adds a fair amount, even unconsciously, to the overall presentation. His voice acting, he also, was it Taurus Bulbous? I think that's right. Another thing for people of roundabout my age, he was a giant bull that went opposite Darkwing Duck for a couple of episodes, and that Darkwing Duck remains a hilarious parody that I very much fondly remember. And he had a couple of roles, again, one role, but a couple of episodes of that. Again, we're going to get to a few more of them as we go along that were his voice roles, but he's had quite a few of them. Personally speaking, one of the first things I remember seeing him in is the second Home Alone movie, which shows that whole, look, it's a funny premise, but if that series teaches us anything, it's that a funny premise for 90 minutes becomes grating at 99 minutes, basically. But he is the hotel concierge for the hotel that Macaulay Culkin, Kevin, I forget his last name, Kevin, winds up kind of scamming his way into. And he's very distrustful of Kevin, who is our protagonist for that series. And he's constantly trying to, figure out what's going on, trying to one-up him. And he has such a great way of embodying the character. I don't think I can come up with a better just example of that than after the credit card has been reported stolen and he's figured out that this kid is playing them. He takes a couple of other hotel staffers, no police or security actually. No, there is a security officer, a very old security officer, because, hey, it was the 90s, so hotel security is at least 90 years old. And they go to the room that Kevin has rented, they break in, and Kevin, repeating a gag from the first movie, plays a clip of, loudly plays a movie, I think it's actually the follow-up to the black and white gangster movie that he plays in the first one. And the character on television loudly asks, who is it? And they assume it's the actual parent here. Because a kid shouldn't be able to scam them like that. But they reach in and you hear this loud, authoritative voice go, who is it? And his response, without missing a beat, is, it's the concierge, sir. And it's just, you really have to. There's no way I'm going to do it justice here, sitting here and talking. But that moment, I found hilarious. Even as a child, just kind of the bluster that he is able to pack into that, the self-importance that goes along with being, a hotel concierge. It's a shame that he's not in more of that movie, because we very quickly go back to, I believe they're now known the Sticky Bandits, Joe Pesci, and I forget the other guy. My apologies to him. I forget the actor's name. But I thought again, Tim Curry, just a very big bright spot for that movie as long as he's in it. That's also one of the movies that introduced the world to Rob Schneider. Yet another reason to dislike it, because heaven knows we don't need Rob Schneider. But again, when I was a kid, that was one of the first ones that I saw him in, and he's again just kind of a bright spot in that movie as that slightly pompous, delusions of grandeur character. And again, when you're a kid, you're very much in the corner of Macaulay Culkin, and you want to see him succeed. So anyone put in his path is, you're going to dislike. And Tim Curry is able to make that character very dislikable in the best way. I don't think you could take that same character and it could play in a much better movie and get kind of the same results. And again, just a real bright spot for that whole movie, which was sadly lacking in those. Let me see, what else do we have here? We have some fun ones actually coming up. Excuse me. One of the other ones that was kind of my first exposure to Tim Curry, God, I'm going to feel so old talking about this, but back when you had to rent movies, VHS tapes, mind you, not DVDs. I'm old enough to have rented VHS tapes, ladies and gentlemen. I got not kind of suckered, but I took again, I'm a kid. I'm in I think it was even a grocery store now that I think about it. I'm in the grocery store with my parents, and they have a video rental section, and I stumble across The Three Musketeers. Now, that's a story that seems to get remade every 5 to 10 years. Bear in mind, none of the adaptations of The Three Musketeers have ever been all that close to replicating the vision of Alexander Dumas, but Dumas has very complex work. There have been a few different versions of The Man in the Iron Mask. I don't think any of them have really kind of captured what goes on in that movie, or in that book, rather. They just screw with it enough to make it a bit more palatable, because Dumas' stuff tends to end a bit tragically, and I've actually read Man in the Iron Mask, one of the few of his that I've read all the way through, and I very much enjoyed it, but no movie has ever done that story. They've all done takes on it, and again, for what they are, varying degrees of success. The Count of Monte Cristo has never adequately been adapted, just because that's a deeply complicated book that deals with a tremendous amount of time. I actually think if we're talking about those, the Richard Chamberlain television movie, The Count of Monte Cristo, is probably the most accurate in terms of both the ending, some of the complexity of his plots. That's another one of those movies that gets remade every so often, and it's hard to do right. But anyway, I digress. As, a kid, 12, 13, 14, something like that, I was, again, drawn to, Three Musketeers variant. This would be the, 93, version of the story. And you have two antagonists. One is Michael Wincott as Rochefort, who is also in the books. Slight difference as far as the ending goes. He and D'Artagnan doesn't actually kill him in the book, but again, differences. And your primary antagonist is Cardinal Richelieu, played by Tim Curry. He's trying to conspire to have the king murdered, so he can put someone on the throne that he can manipulate. He wants to be promoted to Pope, and I might be confusing both this version and some of the stuff from the book, because again, there's complicated stuff there. So if some of the details bleed together, I'm just going to have to beg your forgiveness. And with Richelieu in this, he's a very good embodiment of that character. He's a very, not a physical threat, but a threat because of the office he holds. again, cardinal in the Catholic Church is a very high office. Certainly nothing to be sneezed at. And he's very manipulative. He very intelligent, and he comes across on screen as that. He's a very intelligent, very kind of self-absorbed, manipulative, pseudo-pious individual who really wants power. And again, there's not a whole lot of complexity, especially in this version. I think that was done by Disney. That version was done by Disney. So again, they're going to eschew complexity and drama for bright colors and simple to read scenarios, which is fine. That's what Disney does. That's not a complaint. It's a recognition of the target audience. I can only, by the same token, I can only complain so much about Transformers. It's aimed at teenage boys who like to watch things explode. Again, you know your audience, you make money. I can only complain so much. And he does a great job for that, being a very, dislikable character. And my dad's dog will not shut up. Sorry about that. Hey, shut it. Hey, sorry, he's yappy, and I can't do anything. Because apparently it's illegal to, duct tape their mouths shut. Sorry, I love animals, he just frustrates me at times. Alright. Again, there were quite a few children's movies that Curry made in this next bit of time period. Again, Three Musketeers. He's actually the voice of the antagonist in The Pebble and the Penguin, for those of you who follow non-Disney animation. Again, with it, just tremendous voice work. Excuse me. And around that same time... Jeez, now I gotta scroll down. Yeah, around that same time, he also did one of the things he's best known for. He plays Pennywise the Dancing Clown in the two-part miniseries adaptation of Stephen King's It. And... look, Tim Curry, with that performance, gave an entire generation a severe phobia of clowns. I mean, it's an extraordinary performance that he gives as far as it goes. And, again, he's covered in makeup, clown makeup, which makes sense for, again, he's playing a clown. But his voice, and I have to, again, his voice is very different in this movie, in that show. If you've only heard him, just kind of with his normal speaking voice, or even his normal voice in an American accent instead of a British one, because he is English by birth, I believe, and by nationality, he does something different with his voice for Pennywise. He makes it a bit more guttural. It's almost like a croaking sound at times, and it's very creepy. I mean, anytime he's on screen for that, in that miniseries, he is, again, scary. Again, a lot of people have a serious phobia of clowns simply because of the visage of him with his giant sharp teeth, sitting down in the gutter, yanking. God, for as much as I love that story, you'd think I'd remember some of the characters' names better than I do. But I mean, the first thing you see him do, and the first thing that happens in the book too, coincidentally one of my favorite Stephen King stories, he kills a kid. He in the book he bites his arm clean off. They're not as graphic on the show because, again, limits, which are fine. But, again, you don't get much worse than that. And here he is, first 10 minutes, and you have a creepy clown who, again, eats part of and murders, 9, 10-year-old? I mean, it's horrible, but it's great. And he shows up frequently throughout the rest of it. I mean, they confront him, and, I mean, he does some things like moving around through pictures. Through still pictures, you see the moving clown, and he's terrorizing the people who are the Losers Club who are trying to stop him, and that's actually the name of the group. It's what they named themselves. I'm not trying to disparage them. That's what they call themselves. For those of you who weren't aware of that, and he's very scary. He looks right at the camera for a bunch of this stuff. He's menacing when he's threatening to kill them. It comes across as genuine. You think he's going to do it. There's a scene in the library, I want to say, where he's walking around threatening and menacing the club who can see him, and there's a bunch of other patrons in the library who can't, which is always a very jarring thing to watch someone that, everyone else ignores a person, but you can see them. And he's, when they announced they were remaking it, which they're still in the process of doing by and large, I don't envy whoever has to play Pennywise for that movie. I really don't, because... I mean, just from a presence standpoint, from the voice to working with and through the makeup that he's wearing, again, he's wearing clown makeup and a wig, a big brightly colored wig. Clowns aren't I hate to say clowns aren't scary because I know there's a bunch of people out there who are going to vehemently disagree with me. But in and of themselves, clowns aren't supposed to be scary. They're supposed to elicit feelings of, joy, happiness, uh, silliness, laughter. And there's nothing inherently evil about the makeup that he's wearing. I mean, there's discussions about how, a a clown that's not intended to be scary is never going to have a sharp angle drawn on their makeup, and clowns that try to be scary tend to have those. Just from a psychological standpoint, round and soft edges make you feel more at ease, whereas angular ones put you more on edge. But there's nothing overtly evil about the makeup on Pennywise, and yet Tim Curry is able to make it scary. That again, Pennywise is a very very scary character. Especially if you've. But anytime I even read the book now, I hear Tim Curry's voice, his Pennywise voice, whenever I read that book, and the clown or any of the other forms he takes speaks. That's what I hear. I don't know what he did to create that voice, but man, is it effective. That's the type of thing that gets into your brain, and late at night, when you are imagining you're hearing things, that's the type of voice that is seeping into your subconscious, telling you it's just around the corner. I mean, it's terrifying in the best way possible. And again, I have nothing but sympathy for whoever they cast as Pennywise for the upcoming movie. Honestly, part of me hopes they'll be able to get Curry back for it at least. And if they go with a very, that would kind of be my initial inclination. And even though he's much older now, it would still work. Just based on the strength of his acting ability, he could still be that scary. And he could also, one of the things I hope they're able to do better in that remake, incidentally, if you don't mind the tangent, is some of the effects that they use for the spider form of it in the television miniseries are poor, silly almost. And if they're able to kind of go with a mesh of practical and CGI effects for the movie, good CGI, he speaks to them in other ways besides just through the clown. Again, it is a shapeshifter, and Pennywise the Dancing Clown is just a favorite form, because nobody looks twice at a clown, and he is able to kind of lure you close and then eat you. And but again, he communicates with them other ways, and I would very much like to, if they could just bring him back for even a voice role for some of that stuff, because I can't imagine anyone doing it any better. I hope they do. I hope whatever they wind up doing with it works out very well, but I got a very, very difficult time imagining anyone improving on what Tim Curry did as Pennywise. Again, still, to this day, if you're having I imagine his, rapidly moving toward you visage with, the voice and the teeth still haunts people's nightmares, and deservedly so. The other thing that came out kind of around that time that I got kind of a kick out of, another one of my earlier exposures, comes from the Muppets version of Treasure Island, where he plays Long John Silver. And look, anyone who points a gun at Kermit the Frog is pretty evil, and he does point a gun at Kermit the Frog. I have a minor gripe with almost every version of Treasure Island as they've adapted it, because they always try to turn Long John Silver into a redeemed character by the end of it. And this is no different. And that's in no small part because they aim these movies at kids. And his friendship with the primary character, whose name I cannot remember for the life of me, they don't want that to be pure manipulation. They don't want to... Again, when you're talking about kids, I understand. I do. It's just that Long John Silver was not a redeemed character at the end of that. He was always a very, he was a bad guy. And in all of these versions, they try to redeem him to one extent or another, including this one when he holds off, the oncoming Muppets so that the kid can escape. He winds up reclaiming, kind of being evil by the end of it. But, it's a Muppet movie. You're only going to be so evil. But it's just another instance of him with, screen presence, just everything kind of lighting up the screen. He gets to menace Kermit the Frog. He deals a lot with, and it's an odd thing, but the best actors are able to work with the Muppets. It sounds odd when you say it, but a good actor will work with the Muppets. They react to them just like they're there. Like Kermit is a actual thing. They don't treat them like puppets or anything. They treat them as full characters. And the very good actors who interact with the Muppets are able to do that. I mean, again, Tim Curry here, Michael Caine in the Muppets Christmas Carol. Michael Caine is Ebenezer Scrooge. Oh, I love that. But again, the way they interact with objectively silly puppets, but again, a good actor will be able to work with and play off of them, and he's able to do that and still kind of steal every scene he's in. And he's just got such a. This is one of the things that kind of struck me about his overall filmography. He's frequently in movies that children see, but at the same time, he's also able to be in more adult fare. Again, he's in. The last thing I saw, actually, in one of the creepier ones, he's in 2 episodes of Criminal Minds. The close of season 6 and the start of 7, I want to say. I'm going to double check that. Give me just a moment. I need to double check this, but I want to say 6 to 7. It might be 5 to 6. I think that's more. Or is it 7? Okay. I really should have double checked this. Fortunately, all right. I'm gonna kill this thing if I keep looking for this. But there's 2, and again, I want to say it's like 6 to 7, 7 to 8. He's at the close of one season and the start of the next. As a character known as the Prince of Darkness, he's killing. That's the nickname the media gives to him as his character. He kills people during rolling blackouts in Los Angeles. He's heavily addicted to methamphetamines. His teeth are terrible. A very, very damaged character, but he looks awful, which is, again, by design. The character is supposed to look terrible. But he kidnaps a little girl at the end of the first. Again, this is the close of one season and then into the start of the next. And he is just, again, if you've ever seen the show, there are some twisted individuals that appear on Criminal Minds, and his is one of them. He does some pretty awful stuff. And again, most certainly not a children's show, but he's able to be this, disgusting and intimidating figure, even in, again, for something that's meant completely for a mature audience. That kind of range is very, very rare to find, and just a supreme compliment to his abilities. Because I think the character's name was Billy Flynn. That I'm sure of. I won't have to let you guys stew as I try to double check that one. There's some other interesting stuff with that character because he plays someone who is very, very stupid. He's borderline illiterate, has terrible handwriting, and just physically very disgusting. He's heavy-set, he's unwashed, his teeth are just awful, which in this instance I believe probably a byproduct of, again, the meth use that his character has. But he just so completely inhabits this horrible person. And then as we learn more about that character, and there is no sympathy for this individual, mind you, by the end of it, but he is explained. And to be able to add some depth to that character, to talk about what he's gone through, to portray that, again, with his face, a lot of, I can't think of anything negative to say about it. He's just able to go from something that is completely appropriate for children and be, appropriately scary and intimidating to something that could scare the crap out of adults. It's a real gift and speaks to the range that he has. And again, 2010. So that would have been like 6 to 7, something like that. That's going to bother me until I get to actually double check it, but I won't do that here. As far as his voice work on like television, he was part of Captain Planet and the Planeteers. The Pirates of Darkwater, for a few of us out there who remember that and wish that we had actually gotten closure on that show. Again, a kind of prolific voice actor as well as a physical actor. What was the last thing I wanted to talk about? There was one other thing on his filmography that I was really interested in bringing up, and I can't remember. I'm looking through it now, and I can't remember. It might have just been actually talking about Criminal Minds that I wanted to kind of be my last real discussion here. But he's, again, also a very prolific voice actor. He did the voice of the King Cat on The Cat Returns, which is an early Hayao Miyazaki movie, which I saw in another instance of him altering his voice, because that doesn't sound a whole lot like what you think of when you think of Tim Curry. very much a very different kind of tonal quality. He kind of has a bit of an Elvis impression going on, and I don't mean that as an insult. That's just kind of the feeling that voice evokes. And again, able to do that very well. He's been in a couple of video games too. I mean, just a lot of work, very consistently from the beginning of his career towards where he is now. He's still doing work. I don't think there's anything else. He's done a lot recently. Again, a lot of voice. Not sure why that is. If he's just not wanting to do the physical stuff all that much anymore or whatnot. But okay, the most recent thing I saw him in was actually the John Landis film Burke and Hare. Very dark comedy. Stars Simon Pegg and Andy Serkis. Some of my favorite people in the world, some of my favorite actors are in that, and he's in that. So again, that was the most recent thing, and just wherever he goes, he's able to bring just again a level of screen presence, a level of just elevating the game of everything that he's around, and that's again not a lot of people can do that. He absolutely can. And just kind of in closing here, I got to be wrapping up. You don't want to listen to me go for like a full 90 minutes, so we'll be trying to close right around the hour mark. He's just kind of what makes him so successful. Again, presence, which I've talked about. When he's on screen, and he owns any scene he's in. And he's shared screen time with some, impressive people, and he still is able to kind of dominate, not dominate in a negative sense, but he very much is a big presence. The other thing I really kind of need to touch on here is what he's able to do physically. And he is very good at adjusting, posture, just kind of miming. I hate to say that because it's not, traditional mime work, but able to work within his body to change, how he carries himself and how that projects onto the screen. Now, I've talked about this at length with certain other actors, and specifically Christopher Lee. Acting is more than just your face. It's everything else about you contributes to it. And again, listen to the Christopher Lee episode for a full discussion of that on that. But it applies here to Tim Curry as well. The difference between Cardinal Richelieu, who is a very wealthy, very proper person, the way he always carries himself with his posture, a dignified, superior air. Contrasted with, again, Prince of Darkness Billy Flynn, who is very stoop-shouldered, very hunched, very uncomfortable in the light, very uncomfortable, with things like that. And all of that comes through in just what he's able to do physically, how he carries himself. And you've got two extremes, and then, of course, the physical acting from his stuff as Pennywise is the same way. It's very menacing. It's designed to be a tad off-putting. It's very aggressive. It sets you back on your heels mentally and maybe literally. And it's, again, acting is more than your face and your eyes and your voice. It's what you're able to do with your whole body. And he's able to use everything at his disposal to craft a character, to craft an impression. And he can do it across, any medium by and large. Real quick plug, he's actually got a bunch of audiobooks out that are certainly worth looking into picking up. Hang on. Most recently, he did a version of Dracula. He's done A Christmas Carol. He's also he's been Ebenezer Scrooge in a couple of different versions. He's just a superb actor in that he's able to do, again, everything across a wide base. To any audience by and large, and he's able to get across what he wants to get across. It's one of the things that's made him so successful as a villain is it doesn't matter if he's supposed to scare kids in a kid-friendly movie or adults in an adult movie. He is able to be whatever kind of villain you need him to be. Scary, superior, intelligent, meth-addled and psychotic, whatever it happens to be. He's got the range to do it. He's got the drive to, pull off any of those, and it's just absolutely one of the supremely gifted character actors, especially villain characters, that's come out almost ever. Again, the man's been working pretty consistently since the early 70s, as far as film goes. Like the very early 70s, or late 60s in some cases, if you want to get into his stage work. And just, again, when you're able to work that consistently and achieve that level of consistent quality, it speaks volumes to him as a performer and what he's able to do. Again, just one of the finest villainous actors still going today. And again, I mentioned earlier, I think he could translate very well as Pennywise the Dancing Clown again if he wanted to. I don't know if they're going to go that way or they're going to go a different way, but it ought to say something that 20, 30 years after he did after he did it on television, I think he could still pull it off in another movie, or in a movie rather, instead of a television series. So, take that for what it's worth. I have nothing but praise for all of his screen roles and what he's able to do as an actor. It's a real pleasure to watch him. Anytime he's on screen, he brings everything up. He's always a bright spot. I've never seen him phone in anything, even if it's just a voice role. It's never half-assed. It's always, to the best of his abilities, and it's always kind of elevating everything else around it. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and close up shop with a few plugs, then we'll go ahead and get out of here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you for telling a friend about the show. Thank you for sharing it on, Facebook, Twitter, or, again, someone you actually know in person. If you think they'd like the show, I'm very happy. Again, let them know. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Thank you for following the Rattlechen Broadcasting Network, however you have done that, on Facebook, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Stitcher. You can follow us all there. You can subscribe to us. You can rate us. We appreciate ratings. You can leave compliments, critiques, criticisms, however you'd like to do that. That is all very much appreciated. I'll be back next week. I'm trying to remember if I need to synergize anything for next week. I don't think I do. I'm pretty sure I've got to be reviewing Tomorrowland this coming Wednesday, so there's not a whole lot to talk about there. I've got an idea for next week, bit of an oddball one, and I'll see if it has some merit to it. But I will be back next week. I'm still doing this thing once a week, unless I've got a compelling reason not to do it, because I miss doing this show when I don't. I miss you guys out there listening. I miss the energy it takes. I miss being able to think things through and discuss them and whatnot. So I'll be back next week. Real quick rundown for the rest of the upcoming week. This Sunday, the 411 Ground and Pound radio show goes live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Myself and Jeff Harris will be reviewing UFC 187, which comes to you tomorrow. I'll have live coverage of that over at 411 Mania for anyone who cares. All right, this coming Wednesday, the 27th, myself and Mark Radulich will be getting together, and we will be reviewing Tomorrowland, featuring George Clooney's chin. Thursday will be the Metal Hammer of Doom. I don't know what Mark and Robert have planned for that, but they'll have something. So tune in for that. That's usually a good time. Then, again, I'll be back next Friday. As far as the rest of this week is gone, I've mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it one more time just to get it out there again. It's been Mad Max week here on the Rattlechen Broadcasting Network. Mark and I reviewed Mad Max Fury Road on Wednesday. Go back and listen to that again. We have differing opinions, different perspectives on this one, and that tends to lead to the most interesting discussion instead of us just agreeing with each other the whole time. So go ahead and listen to that. And again, The Long Road to Ruin yesterday on the Mad Max trilogy, the original ones all featuring Mel Gibson. Most certainly worth a listen. Sean and Mark usually have interesting discussions and whatnot that come out of that, so I would encourage you to give a listen to any of those. And again, I'll be back next week. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for spreading the good word about the show. I appreciate it all. No one else to thank, no one else to sign off for besides myself. So I'm Robert Winfree, everybody, reminding you all out there that you need a decent villain. Otherwise, you've just got guys running around in tights and capes, and they come off as kind of douchebaggy. Just throwing it out there, because there are some of those. Or you've got a bunch of kids coming back as adults to a small town in Maine to complain about their lives instead of having to stop a evil clown that actually turns out to be a spider, but that whole other thing. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, everybody. Thanks for listening, and here's Tony Montana.
So say good night to the bad guy.